Picture this. You pour your entire life savings into a brilliant, game-changing new product. You finally launch it, and you hear absolute crickets. It is a completely preventable nightmare. So today, in this explainer, we're looking at the ultimate insurance policy for any aspiring entrepreneur. Market research. We're going to explore exactly how to validate your business ideas before you risk a single dime.
So it all boils down to $1 million question. Will people actually buy this thing? The fundamental, genuinely terrifying reality of business is the huge financial risk of pouring your money into developing, manufacturing, and marketing a product that nobody actually wants. If we don't know the answer to this question before we start, we aren't running a business, right? We're just gambling.
To make sure we aren't just gambling, here is our roadmap. We'll start with exactly why this research matters. Look at the two different approaches companies take, compare primary and secondary research, figure out how to get accurate data, and finally, how to actually present your findings. All right, let's dive right into Section 1, Why Market Research Matters. It's all about avoiding the guesswork. When we talk about the market, it can sound kind of intimidating, but it really just breaks down into 4 super practical questions. First, willingness. Would customers even buy this in the first place? Second, price. What are they actually prepared to pay? I mean, a gadget might seem like it's worth $100, but if the market caps out at 50, you've got a massive problem. Third, location. Where would they most likely buy it? Are we talking online or in a huge retail store? And finally, competition. How strong are the current competitors out there? Nailing down these 4 questions is how you avoid expensive guesswork and literally protect your bottom line. Moving on to Section 2, Product versus Market. Let's look at the 2 approaches to creating things. When creating something totally new, companies usually fall into one of 2 very different camps. First, there's the product-oriented approach. This focuses entirely on the product itself, rather than asking the market what it wants first. This works great for basic necessities, like farm tools, where the function is super obvious, or for crazy revolutionary tech, like the original iPad, where consumers didn't even know they wanted a tablet until it actually existed. But then, there's the market-oriented approach. This is where you do the research first, to find out exactly what consumers want before you even start building. For the vast majority of businesses operating in highly competitive national or international markets, being market-oriented is absolutely essential to reduce your risk of failure. Okay, Section 3, Primary versus Secondary Research. It's time to choose our data. First up, we have quantitative information. Think of this as the numbers game. When we need statistically measurable facts, like, say, what percentage of children drink sugar-free cola, this is the hard data that gives us a sense of scale and helps us accurately size up a market opportunity. But you know, numbers don't always tell the whole story. To get the why behind those numbers, we need qualitative information. If we want to know what customers specifically dislike about a new packaging design, we need to hear their actual thoughts, their emotions, and their frustrations. This gives us that nuanced context that a spreadsheet just can't provide. So, where is all this data actually coming from? Well, primary research, sometimes called field research, is all about rolling up your sleeves and gathering completely original data through direct contact with your customers. You are generating brand new information that literally no one else in the world has yet. Now, you've got a few tools in your toolkit for this. Questionnaires give you fantastic detailed opinions, but they run the risk of generating bad data if your phrasing is confusing. Online surveys are incredibly cost-effective and can reach a massive audience super quickly. One-on-one interviews are great for deep dives, though they take a ton of time and run the risk of interviewer bias, where the person asking the questions accidentally influences the answers. And lastly, focus groups let you observe a small group of people hashing out what they think about your product. Picking the right method here just depends on what kind of business you're launching. Since we obviously can't ask every single person on Earth for their opinion, we have to pick a sample. You could go with a random sample, where absolutely every member of the population has an even chance of being picked. Or you could use a quota sample, where people are deliberately selected based on very specific characteristics. Look at it this way. If you're selling expensive luxury watches, a random sample of everyone might give you totally useless data, right? But a quota sample targeting high-income earners, that is going to directly inform your bottom line. And that brings us to the flip side, secondary research. A lot of people call this desk research because, well, somebody else has already done the heavy lifting. Instead of going out into the field, you leverage information that already exists. This could be internal stuff like your past sales records, or external sources like government population stats, trade journals, or industry databases. As you can see, there's a big trade-off here.
Primary research is incredibly relevant and specific to your exact business, but man, it takes time and it is usually pretty expensive. Secondary research is much cheaper and way quicker to get your hands on, but it sacrifices some of that precision. It might be a little out of date or just not perfectly relevant to the exact product you're trying to launch.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 4, getting accurate data, and more importantly, avoiding the pitfalls. Listen, even the best research toolkit is completely useless if your data is fundamentally flawed. We have to actively avoid 4 major traps here. First, sample size. If your sample is too small, it's just not going to represent the whole population. Second, question phrasing. If you ask leading or confusing questions that push a customer to answer a certain way, your data is going to be completely skewed. Third, the age of the data. If you're relying on secondary info from 3 years ago, market trends have probably already passed you by. And finally, bias. Humans have a nasty habit of subconsciously ignoring data that contradicts their own brilliant ideas. If you ignore these pitfalls, you are right back to gambling your money on a failed product.
All right, final step. Section 5, presenting your findings. It's time to make this data understandable.
So you have your accurate data, but now you need to explain it to your team or maybe to your investors. The classic bar chart is absolutely your best friend for comparing distinct categories. If you need to instantly prove which of your 3 product prototypes totally dominated in user testing, this visual makes the winner undeniable. It just cuts through the noise.
Now, if you want to show proportions like market share, donut or pie charts are literally the best way to go. If your goal is to show investors exactly how much of the market is swallowed up by competitors versus the juicy gap left for you to capture, this makes those percentages crystal clear and completely impossible to ignore.
And finally, we have line graphs. These are your go-to for showing trends over time, like the historical story of how sales have changed over a 5-year period. They map out the momentum of a market, which lets you project that trend forward and prove to everyone that you are entering a space that is actually growing rather than dying.
So I want you to think about that brilliant product idea you've been kicking around in your head. Based on what we just covered, would you rely on random sampling to get a broad view, or would a quota sample be way more effective for your specific audience? And once you have that precious original data, how are you going to present it to convince the world? Because answering these questions isn't just some boring academic exercise. It is the absolute foundation of your future empire.